you mean, Miss Elsa?
Play it, Sam. Play as time goes by.
Oh, I can't remember it, Miss Elsa. I'm a little rusty on it.
I'll hum it for you. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Sing it, Sam.
You must remember this. A kiss is just a kiss. A sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say I love you. On that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
Let's see if I get it right. It was La Belle Aurore, wasn't it? Yes, I remember. But of course, that was the day the Germans marched into Paris. Not an easy day to forget. I remember everything clearly. The Germans wore grey. You wore blue. But we always have Paris. We've lost it for a while. Until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night. I'm not good at being noble. But it doesn't take much to see that the problems of two lonely people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday it will change. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I have a feeling that this is the beginning of a long friendship. Sam, you may play it again now. He's looking at you, kid. And next time you come to Casablanca, don't forget to visit Rick's Cafe, where I'll have some bourbon waiting for you.
You must remember this. A kiss is still a kiss. A sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers move, they still say I love you. On that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by. Moonlight and love songs are never out of date. Hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. Woman needs man, and man must have his mate. That no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes goes by. Garçon, can you tell the bartender to pour up a double Jack Daniels? Straight, no ice, please. Thank you. And still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by. Moonlight and love songs never out of date. Hearts full of passion, even jealousy and hate. Every woman needs a man, and man must have his mate. That no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
Louis, have your man go with Mr. Laszlo and take care of his luggage.
Certainly, Rick. Anything you say. Find Mr. Laszlo's luggage and put it on the plane.
Yes, sir.
This way.
If you don't mind, you fill in the names. That'll make it even more official.
You think of everything, don't you?
And the names are Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo.
But why my name, Richard?
Because you're getting on that plane.
I don't understand. What about you?
I'm staying here with him till the plane gets safely away.
No, Richard, no. What has happened to you? Last night
Last night we said a great many things. You said I was to do the thinking for both of us. Well, I've done a lot of it since then. It all adds up to one thing. You're getting on that plane with Victor where you belong.
But, Richard, no,
Now, you've got to listen to me. You have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up at a concentration camp. Isn't that true, Louis?
I'm afraid Major Strasser would insist.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have, we lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. He's looking at you, kid.
Casablanca wasn't just a wartime romance film, it was a chaotic production miracle that nearly collapsed multiple times before becoming one of cinema's most enduring masterpieces. The set erupted in daily conflicts. The script was being frantically rewritten every night. Actors showed up not knowing how the story would end. Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman barely spoke off camera. The director was juggling studio executives who wanted to scrap the entire project. And yet somehow, from this behind-the-scenes pandemonium emerged a film that would define Hollywood's golden age. Today, we're revealing 20 weird facts about Casablanca that will forever change how you see this iconic film. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking truth about that final airport scene that Warner Brothers kept hidden for decades. Number 20. Nobody knew how the film would end until the last minute. The iconic ending of Casablanca, it wasn't planned. It wasn't even written when filming began. The production started shooting without a completed script, forcing the cast to learn new pages daily. Ingrid Bergman repeatedly asked director Michael Curtiz, "Who do I end up with?" She couldn't decide how to play her scenes with Bogart or Henried because nobody would tell her which man she'd choose. The writers, Julius and Philip Epstein, along with Howard Koch, were frantically rewriting the screenplay throughout production. The famous goodbye scene at the airport was only finalized days before it was shot. Producer Hal Wallace himself claims to have written the legendary final line, "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship," after filming had wrapped. What audiences saw as a tightly crafted narrative was actually assembled piece by piece under crushing deadline pressure, with actors performing scenes without knowing their character's ultimate fate. Number 19, the film's most famous line was almost cut. "Here's looking at you, kid." 5 words that defined Casablanca and became one of cinema's most memorable quotes. Yet this iconic line wasn't even in the script. It was something Humphrey Bogart reportedly said to Ingrid Bergman while teaching her poker between takes. The phrase felt natural, so Bogart improvised it during filming. Studio executives reviewing the dailies initially flagged the line for removal, considering it too casual and modern for the period setting. They worried it disrupted the film's dramatic tone. Director Michael Curtiz had to fight to keep the improvised dialogue, arguing its emotional authenticity outweighed historical accuracy. The line appears 4 times in the final film, each repetition gaining emotional weight. When test audiences responded powerfully to the phrase, Warner Brothers finally embraced it, later featuring it prominently in marketing materials. What began as casual table talk between takes transformed into the emotional core of Rick and Ilsa's doomed romance. Number 18, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman actually disliked each other. The chemistry between Rick and Ilsa sizzles on screen. Off camera, ice cold. Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman barely spoke when the cameras weren't rolling. Bergman found Bogart's constant smoking offensive and his drinking habits unprofessional. Bogart complained that Bergman was too tall and too Swedish, forcing him to stand on blocks during their scenes together. Their working relationship wasn't hostile, just completely professional and distant. Bergman later admitted, "I kissed him, but I never knew him." She was preoccupied with her troubled marriage and felt disconnected from the production, later confessing she didn't even understand why the film was significant until years after its release. Cinematographer Arthur Edison deserves extraordinary credit for capturing what appears to be smoldering romance between 2 actors who, when the director called cut, would immediately retreat to opposite sides of the set without a word to each other. Their mutual indifference created the perfect visual metaphor for Rick and Ilsa's impossible love. Number 17, the emotional La Marseillaise scene featured real refugees crying. When the patrons of Rick's Cafe sing La Marseillaise to drown out the Nazi anthem, those tears you see aren't acting, they're real. Most of the extras in that scene were actual European refugees who had fled Nazi persecution. Many had families still trapped in occupied countries. The power of that moment transcended filmmaking. As the orchestra played and these refugees sang their hearts out, the set fell silent between takes. Cinematographer Arthur Edison recalled, "These weren't performers anymore. These were people reliving the most traumatic moments of their lives." One extra, a woman from France who hadn't heard her national anthem since escaping Paris, collapsed after the scene wrapped. Director Michael Curtiz, himself a Hungarian Jewish émigré, briefly stopped production. The raw emotion captured on film wasn't manufactured by Hollywood. It was the authentic expression of people who understood, far better than any actor could pretend to, exactly what was at stake in the real war against fascism. Number 16. The script was based on a play so bad it was never produced. Casablanca, the timeless masterpiece, sprang from a failed stage play called Everybody Comes to Rick's. That was so poorly received, it never made it to production. Writers Murray Burnett and Joan Allison shopped their play around Broadway without success. Producers called it too political and naive about world affairs. When Warner Brothers story analyst Stephen Carnott discovered the manuscript, he recognized its potential despite the flaws. The studio purchased the rights for $20,000, the highest amount ever paid for an unproduced play at that time. The original work was dramatically overhauled, but key elements remained: the North African setting, the cynical American exile, the woman from his past, and the crucial letters of transit. What audiences don't realize is how radically the story transformed during adaptation. The original, Rick was conceived as an older, more physically imposing figure. ILSA, originally named Lois, was American, not Norwegian. The political undertones were sharpened, and the entire third act was completely reimagined. Hollywood magic didn't just improve the source material, it completely reinvented it. Number 15, the white dinner jacket. Humphrey Bogart wears. Wasn't his idea. Humphrey Bogart's white dinner jacket in Casablanca created one of cinema's most enduring style icons, but Bogart fought against wearing it, insisting his character would never dress so formally while hiding out in Casablanca. The costume was forced on him by the studio's marketing department. Bogart preferred Rick in darker, more subdued attire, reflecting his character's cynicism. But producer Hal Wallace overruled him, believing the white jacket would make Bogart stand out against the film's shadowy nightclub setting and provide visual contrast to the predominantly dark-suited Nazi officers. Costume designer Ori Kelly specifically tailored the jacket to broaden Bogart's shoulders and improve his on-screen stature beside the taller Ingrid Bergman. The actor's resistance faded after seeing himself in rushes. The white jacket transformed him, adding moral ambiguity to Rick's character, a visual metaphor for the light and darkness battling within him. What began as a marketing decision became an essential character element, and influenced men's fashion for decades. Sometimes Hollywood knows best even when the star disagrees. Number 14, Dooley Wilson, Sam, couldn't actually play piano. Play it, Sam. It's one of cinema's most misquoted lines, but here's what audiences never realized. Dooley Wilson, who played Sam, couldn't play a single note on the piano. Wilson was actually a drummer and singer who had no piano skills whatsoever. During filming, a real pianist, Elliot Carpenter, sat just off camera playing the actual music while Wilson mimicked his hand movements as best he could. Director Michael Curtis positioned Carpenter so Wilson could see his hands, creating the illusion that Wilson was playing. The deception is particularly noticeable if you watch Wilson's hands closely during as time goes by. His fingering rarely matches the notes we hear. Warner Brothers originally wanted a female singer for the role, with Hazel Scott and Ella Fitzgerald considered. When they decided on Wilson, they assumed replacing a drummer with a pianist was a simple switch. Despite his lack of keyboard skills, Wilson's warm presence and genuine chemistry with Bogart made him irreplaceable, proving some performances transcend technical abilities. Number 13, Conrad Veidt, who played Major Strasser, was actually an anti-Nazi activist. In a twisted bit of casting irony, Conrad Veidt, who portrayed the film's Nazi villain Major Strasser, was in real life a passionate anti-Nazi activist who had fled Germany with his Jewish wife. When filling out his registration card for the Nazi Ministry of Propaganda's race questionnaire, Veidt defiantly wrote his race as Jude, Jewish, in solidarity with his wife. Despite not being Jewish himself, this act of defiance placed him on Nazi watch lists, forcing him to abandon his successful German film career and escape to England in 1933. After relocating to Hollywood, Veidt made it a personal policy to only accept roles where he could play Nazi villains, specifically to ensure these characters were portrayed as the evil he knew them to be. Veidt donated a significant portion of his Casablanca salary to British war relief efforts. The actor brought chilling authenticity to Major Strasser, drawing from his first-hand knowledge of the Nazi officers who had threatened him. His portrayal wasn't just acting. It was personal resistance against a regime that had upended his life. Number 12, the famous Marseillaise scene, violated Hollywood's production code. The emotional scene where the patrons drown out Nazi singing with La Marseillaise nearly didn't make the final cut because it violated Hollywood's strict production code. The problem? The code explicitly prohibited depicting any current nation negatively, and the scene's powerful anti-German sentiment crossed this line. Warner Brothers executives argued heatedly with Joseph Breen, head of the Production Code Administration, claiming the scene was essential. The studio's legal department warned that cutting it would gut the film's emotional core. The compromise reached was subtle but significant. The German officers in Rick's cafe never explicitly identify as Nazis on screen, technically making them generic Germans rather than explicit Nazi party members. This creative workaround allowed the scene to remain, but with military uniforms slightly modified from authentic Wehrmacht designs. The anthem they sing is Die Wacht am Rhein, rather than the Nazi party anthem. These small modifications satisfied the letter of the production code while preserving the scene's powerful impact. It's a perfect example of how filmmakers navigated censorship while still delivering their intended message. Number 11, the film was made. While Casablanca was actually under Allied attack. In one of cinema's strangest coincidences, Casablanca went into production just as the real city of Casablanca was becoming a focal point in World War II. The film began shooting on May 25, 1942, and on November 8, 1942, while the movie was in post-production, Operation Torch launched, with Allied forces invading North Africa and capturing the real Casablanca. This timing wasn't planned, but Warner Brothers immediately recognized the marketing opportunity. The studio rushed to capitalize on the headlines, accelerating the post-production schedule and moving up the national release date. Publicity materials prominently featured maps of North Africa and headlines about the Allied invasion. What audiences didn't realize was that much of the film's dialogue about Casablanca being filled with people waiting for their chance to escape to America had suddenly become reality in reverse. The real city was now filled with American soldiers pushing deeper into Axis territory. The fictional drama had become intertwined with breaking news, blurring the line between Hollywood storytelling and wartime journalism in ways no one could have predicted. Number 10, the airport scene was actually shot on a soundstage with a miniature plane. The fog-shrouded airport finale, with its emotional goodbye against the backdrop of a waiting airplane, wasn't filmed at any airport. It was entirely created on a Warner Brothers soundstage using an ingenious combination of forced perspective and a miniature plane. The aircraft in the background? Just a plywood cutout roughly the size of a large dining table. The famous farewell scene employed one of Hollywood's favorite visual tricks. The mechanics servicing the plane were actually little people hired to create the illusion that a full-size aircraft was sitting far in the distance. The fog wasn't just for atmosphere. It helped hide the seams of the deception. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal even more mind-blowing secrets about how this iconic film was made with nothing but Hollywood ingenuity and a lot of movie magic. This technique, while standard for 1940s filmmaking, created what became one of cinema's most enduring images. The cost-saving measure of using a miniature plane instead of shooting on location. Ironically, gave director Michael Curtiz more control over the fog and lighting, creating the perfect melancholy atmosphere that made the scene so powerful. Number 9. Humphrey Bogart was not the first choice to play Rick Blaine. Humphrey Bogart, whose portrayal of Rick Blaine defined his career and cemented his status as a Hollywood legend, wasn't remotely the studio's first choice for the role. Warner Brothers initially pursued George Raft, who famously rejected the part. They then considered Ronald Reagan, Dennis Morgan, and even Clark Gable before reluctantly settling on Bogart. At the time, Bogart was primarily known for playing gangsters and villains. Studio executives worried he lacked the romantic appeal necessary for the role. Producer Hal Wallace had to fight to cast him, arguing that Bogart's harder edge would actually enhance the character's world-weary cynicism. Bogart himself was initially unenthusiastic about the project, viewing it as just another assignment. At 42, he considered himself too old for romantic leads and was concerned about being overshadowed by Paul Hinrade. His salary for the film was $36,667, less than half what the studio would have paid their first-choice actors. What was seen as a casting compromise turned into one of cinema's most perfect marriages of actor and role, proving sometimes Hollywood's best. Decisions are the ones they're forced to make. Number 8. The famous As Time Goes By. Song was nearly removed from the film. The haunting melody of As Time Goes By became synonymous with Casablanca, but the song nearly vanished from the film entirely. When composer Max Steiner was assigned to write the score, he hated the song and lobbied Warner Brothers to let him replace it with an original composition. Studio head Jack Warner actually approved the change. There was just one problem. Ingrid Bergman had already cut her hair short for her next role in For Whom the Bell Tolls, making it impossible to reshoot the scenes where As Time Goes By featured prominently. Faced with this logistical obstacle, Steiner reluctantly built his entire score around the song he initially despised. The composer's grudging adaptation produced unexpected magic. Steiner wove the melody through the film in different emotional variations, creating one of Hollywood's first truly thematic scores. The song, written by Herman Hupfeld in 1931 for a long-forgotten Broadway show, was given new life. What began as a compromise forced by Bergman's haircut transformed into the emotional backbone of the entire film, proving even creative conflicts can yield cinematic gold. Number 7. The film was almost shelved due to concerns about its political content. In late 1941, as Casablanca was in pre-production, Warner Brothers executives seriously considered shelving the project altogether. Their concern? The film's anti-Nazi stance might violate America's neutrality policies. Before Pearl Harbor, the State Department was pressuring Hollywood to avoid films that could be interpreted as pro-war propaganda. The studio had already invested in the property and begun pre-production when executives received a stern warning from government officials about potential diplomatic consequences. Casablanca's development was temporarily frozen while Warner Brothers consulted with government representatives. Everything changed on December 7, 1941. After Pearl Harbor and America's entry into World War II, the political landscape transformed overnight. Suddenly, Casablanca wasn't problematic. It was patriotic. The studio fast-tracked the project with full government support, even receiving assistance from the Office of War Information, which saw the film as valuable propaganda. What audiences never realized was how close the film came to never existing at all. Had Pearl Harbor occurred a few months later, Casablanca might have been permanently abandoned, its script filed away as too politically dangerous to produce. Number 6. The famous Rick's Café Américain set was recycled from another film. The atmospheric Rick's Café Américain, with its exotic ceiling fans, beaded curtains, and distinct North African flair, wasn't built specifically for Casablanca. In a classic example of Hollywood budget saving, the set was largely recycled from another Warner Brothers film, The Desert Song, with some modifications. Set designer Carl Jules Weil had only 3 weeks to transform the existing Moroccan-themed set. He added architectural elements to suggest a colonial French-African fusion and created Rick's iconic circular bar. Many decorative elements came straight from the Warner Brothers prop warehouse, including the ceiling fans, which had appeared in dozens of films. This recycling wasn't unusual for the era, but what made Rick's Cafe special was how perfectly the repurposed set matched the film's themes. The blending of European, African, and American design elements visually reinforced Casablanca's status as a crossroads where cultures and ideologies collided. The set became so iconic that when Warner Brothers built their theme park decades later, a recreation of Rick's Cafe became one of its centerpieces. Hollywood's frugality inadvertently created one of cinema's most memorable locations. Number 5. Ingrid Bergman was taller than Humphrey Bogart, forcing creative camera tricks. The smoldering on-screen chemistry between Rick and Ilsa required some creative cinematography to hide an awkward physical reality. Ingrid Bergman stood nearly 3 inches taller than Humphrey Bogart. This height difference created significant challenges for director Michael Curtiz and cinematographer Arthur Edison. Throughout filming, Bogart stood on blocks or elevated platforms during their scenes together. In seated scenes, he sat on cushions to appear taller. Bergman sometimes walked in a trench or slouched to reduce her height advantage. These tricks weren't perfectly executed. Watch closely in some scenes, and you'll notice Bergman awkwardly hunching to avoid towering over her leading man. Bogart was particularly sensitive about his height, having already faced similar issues with other leading ladies. The costume department created built-up shoes for him, adding nearly 2 inches to his stature. When these measures weren't enough, Curtiz simply framed shots to create the illusion of equal height. These behind-the-scenes manipulations reveal how Hollywood's romantic ideals, including the expectation that leading men should physically dominate their female counterparts, shaped even technical aspects of filmmaking, forcing physical reality to conform to cultural expectations. Number 4. The actors had no idea they were making a classic. Not a single person involved in making Casablanca believed they were creating one of history's most beloved films. To the cast and crew, it was just another wartime drama in Warner Brothers' busy production schedule, one of dozens being filmed that year. Ingrid Bergman later recalled it as, "Just another film we made. We had no idea it would be a classic." The production was rushed, with shooting completed in just 8 weeks. Paul Henreid considered the role beneath him and only accepted after being threatened with suspension by Warner Brothers. Claude Rains arrived on set having barely glanced at the script. Even director Michael Curtiz viewed it as just another assignment, more concerned with meeting the tight production schedule than creating cinematic history. When the film wrapped, most of the cast moved immediately to other projects without giving Casablanca a second thought. Bergman was particularly dismissive, considering her performance wooden and uninspired. The studio's expectations were so modest that they initially planned only a limited release. No one could have predicted that this routine production would eventually be recognized by the American Film Institute as the second greatest American film of all time. Number 3. Casablanca's script set, a record for number of writers. The screenplay that gave us some of cinema's most quotable lines wasn't the work of a single brilliant writer, but the result of one of Hollywood's most convoluted writing processes. The script passed through the hands of at least 7 different writers, none of whom ever worked together in the same room. Twins, Julius and Philip Epstein, began the adaptation but left mid-process to work on a Frank Capra film. Howard Koch took over but struggled with the romantic elements. Producer Hal Wallace then brought in Casey Robinson, uncredited, to polish the love story. Writer Aeneas Mackenzie was called in to strengthen the political aspects. Even director Michael Curtiz rewrote scenes during filming. The chaotic process created continuity problems that required yet another writer, Lenore Coffey, to smooth out. This fragmented approach should have spelled disaster. Instead, it somehow produced dialogue of remarkable cohesion and quotability. Studio head Jack Warner was so impressed with the final result that he sent an internal memo asking, "Who the hell wrote this thing?" The irony, no single person could truthfully take full credit for what became Hollywood's most celebrated script. Number 2. The famous final line was added after filming Wrapped. "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." This perfect closing line that cemented Rick and Captain Renault's alliance wasn't in any version of the script during filming. The movie originally ended with Rick and Louis walking away in silence as La Marseillaise played. When producer Hal Wallace viewed the first cut, he felt the ending lacked punch. He personally wrote the now famous line and called Bogart back to the studio to dub it in during post-production, weeks after principal photography had concluded. Bogart recorded several takes of the line, with Wallace ultimately selecting the most casual, understated delivery. This last-minute addition demonstrates how fluid the filmmaking process remained throughout production. Wallace's instinct proved correct. The line perfectly captures Rick's character evolution from cynical isolationist to committed ally. It also sets up the possibility, never realized, of a sequel following Rick and Louis' adventures fighting Nazis. Cinema history is filled with pivotal moments that almost never happened. Without Wallace's dissatisfaction with the original ending, Casablanca would have concluded on a much more somber note, depriving culture of one of its most frequently quoted movie lines. Number 1. The film won the Oscar for Best Picture. Before most Americans had seen it, Casablanca won the Academy Award for Best Picture of 1943, despite the fact that most Americans hadn't even seen the film yet. Due to an unusual release pattern and wartime distribution challenges, the movie had only played in a handful of major cities before winning Hollywood's highest honor. Warner Brothers initially released Casablanca in just a few theaters on November 26, 1942, to qualify for the 16th Academy Awards. The nationwide release didn't begin until January 23, 1943, and wartime travel restrictions meant film reels reached smaller markets slowly. By the time Casablanca won Best Picture on March 2, 1944, many Americans in rural areas still hadn't had the opportunity to see it. The film's Oscar victory dramatically changed its commercial trajectory. Warner Brothers rushed new prints to theaters across America, marketing it as the picture that won 3 Academy Awards. This post-Oscar release actually generated more box office revenue than its initial run. Ironically, many viewers first saw Casablanca because it had won Best Picture, rather than it winning because audiences had embraced it. A reverse of the typical Oscar effect. It remains one of the few Best Picture winners that achieved its widest audience after, not before, its Oscar triumph. Bonus fact, here's the shocking truth Warner Brothers kept hidden. When Casablanca began filming in May 1942, its very production constituted a potential violation of American neutrality laws. The studio had begun developing an overtly anti-Nazi film months before Pearl Harbor, when U.S. neutrality legislation explicitly prohibited creating media that could incite involvement in the European conflict. Warner Brothers executives, particularly Harry and Jack Warner, deliberately chose to proceed with the politically charged project despite warnings from legal advisors. Documents later revealed that government officials informally approved the production while publicly maintaining neutrality positions. The Warners, Jewish immigrants whose European family members were directly threatened by Nazi expansion, considered the political risk worth taking. Had the film been completed and released before America entered the war, studio executives could have faced serious legal consequences, including potential charges under the Neutrality Acts. Pearl Harbor not only changed the course of world history, it saved Casablanca from becoming evidence in a federal prosecution. This behind-the-scenes gamble by the Warner Brothers represents one of Hollywood's most daring acts of political courage, transforming a potential legal liability into a timeless patriotic classic. Casablanca wasn't just a film, it was a lightning strike of perfect timing, accidental brilliance, and behind-the-scenes chaos that somehow crystallized into cinematic perfection. A script cobbled together by writers who never met, a leading man who wasn't wanted, a director racing against time, actors who didn't know their characters' fates, a production that began when its politics were legally questionable and wrapped just as those same politics became patriotic duty. From this perfect storm of Hollywood pandemonium emerged not just a film, but a cultural touchstone that continues to resonate across generations. Casablanca reminds us that sometimes the most enduring art emerges not from perfect planning, but from creative adaptation to constant crisis. If you've enjoyed these revelations about one of cinema's greatest treasures, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Because as Rick would say, this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.